Hi, I'm Scott Trebatoski, Director of the Pet Resource Center, and you're watching the Tampa Bay Community Network.
Hi, I'm Bill Hodges, and this is Spotlight on Government. We have Scott Trebatoski with us today. Scott, you're the Executive Director of the Animal Control here in Hillsborough County?
That's correct. We're calling it now the Pet Resources Division.
Oh, that's kind of neat. I kind of like that better than Animal Control.
Yeah, we're trying to get past sort of the old dog catcher, animal control to a more modern feel and a more modern practice.
From what we've talked about and what I'm seeing that you've done in the 8 months you've been here, you're bringing a lot of really good things to this particular department. But we had trouble before you got here. What are some of the things that were going wrong that we're starting to see turning around?
Well, I didn't keep a lot of track on what was going here because I was busy with my own operations, but when they did contact me and then I did start here, there definitely was a lot of people who didn't quite understand what their roles were. Perhaps we didn't have always the right people in the right spots, the right training, the right protocols. We had let some great relationships with our partners deteriorate to where they were virtually gone. It was definitely a challenge. Now we've rebuilt those partnerships. We're seeing new people come in and join in to assist us. The staff is starting to understand what their role is in the community and the privilege it is to work for this community. And the positive is the animals benefit from all of this.
I think your story of how you even got into this business is interesting. You have a master's in business.
That's correct.
And you were in human relations.
Yes.
Human resources. How does that translate into animal care?
Well, it's interesting because my undergraduate's in finance, and then I've got an MBA.
Oh,
so
right.
I've got a very strange background, as it seems, for this. But I think what it does is it's a very analytic, and this industry requires looking at all the problems, dissecting them, stop looking at them the same way. And I think that gave me the opportunity to come in and question everything, to create business plans based on actual statistics and numbers, target certain things, rather than sort of the shotgun approach. It sort of became more surgical. This is where most animals are coming in. How do we make that less? These are animals that we're not adopting out. How do we promote those? How do we market those? So to me, although when I first started, I think a lot of people thought I was crazy coming in with a business plan, I think the sound business plan is actually part of what makes the whole system work well.
Well, it makes so much sense. A lot of people come into the care of animals and shelters with really good hearts, But they don't realize that if the money isn't raised, the resources aren't allocated properly, you can't keep the doors open.
Yes, that's definitely one of the challenges. One of the other challenges that I think we saw when I first came in is, from a business standpoint, a lot of these animals, in fact all these animals, we've got way more invested in than we would charge for an adoption. But we'd try to charge large adoption fees to recoup the money when in fact we were spending as much as $25 a day keeping them in the shelter. So
it's made better to move them on.
Right, and so when I made that argument, if it costs us $25 a day, and I can cut the number of days they're in the shelter down by 3 days, and I can cut the adoption fee by $50, we're actually ahead $25. And so to get people to rethink that.
I bet you there are a lot of people saying, that makes sense.
Yes, it definitely saw a lot of those reactions. I think getting them to listen for the first time might have been a little bit, because everybody thinks with emotion in the animal world.
Really do.
And so I had to kind of mix thinking with the head and feeling with the heart instead of thinking with the heart.
Well, there is a difference between the county-run operation and any of the private facilities, right?
That's correct, because we are probably the first place that most pets are coming to. We're definitely the first place where strays come, and a lot of even owner surrenders. We're an open admission shelter, meaning if we're full and animals are coming in, animals still come in, where a lot of the private shelters, try to work with the resources they have.
You can't just say, no, I'm sorry, we're full today, bring them back 3 weeks from now.
Right, and that's the big challenge, especially because our intake is not linear, meaning that we don't have the same number come in every day. And in the summer, our intake can be 3 times as much as it is in the winter.
Really?
So if you're built to a population that works in the winter, and then all of a sudden you're bringing 3 times as many in the summer, you've got a big challenge of moving animals quickly.
Why are there more coming? I would have thought there'd be more in the winter than in the summer. How does that work?
It's a combination. It's a combination of more animals being born at that time of the year.
Okay.
I think more animals are out and about looking for mates at that time of the year, which is where spay-neuter comes in. If we cut the hormones, then they don't chase each other around. And I think we also have some lifestyle changes that typically take place in the summer, and so that displaces some of the dogs from their homes.
Do any of the dogs get turned loose or cats turned loose when people go back north? Do you ever
I
see
think,
that?
I think most people will bring them actually into the shelter. I'm sure that it does happen. We see it. I mean, I've even seen it in our parking lot. But we've upped our security cameras, and we're starting to get a little bit more aggressive with prosecuting people like that, because there are alternatives. There are places you can get your animals.
What happens if I have a dog and I can no longer take care of the dog?
Well,
and I bring him in? Do I have to pay a fee to bring it in?
There is a nominal fee that we ask that everybody pay. It's around $25 if the animal's ready to be adopted, maybe a little bit higher if we've got some procedures that have to be done. Costs us about $185 to process an animal for adoption.
Wow.
So it really, and the average property taxpayer is paying about $8 per year for our service. So you can see how many years of property taxes it would take for the impact of one animal. So we try to get the people to offset that a little bit, because really the reason that animal control was ever founded was mainly for the strays. Back in the day, humane societies took all the owner surrenders, the government shelter took all the strays, and now it's kind of a mix, partly because of the number of animals. There's not enough private shelters to take them all.
How many animals, Scott, would you have at any one given time in the shelter?
On any given day, we have around 400 animals.
Wow.
It can be higher than that during some of our peak times. We see anywhere from 50 to 75 animals a day coming in during the majority of the year. We bring in about 20,000 animals a year into the shelter.
What would be the percentage of dogs and cats?
Cats slightly more than dogs, but that's also the way the pet ownership is. So it's about 53% cat, 47% dog, which is right along the ownership lines of family pets.
I'm kind of interested because I had a group on not too long ago talking about the catch and release program with cats, where they catch them, turn them back after they neuter them, put them back into the county. And there's about 100,000, believe it or not, stray cats out there, feral cats, running around.
Yeah, the estimates range pretty widely. I don't know that anybody's ever been able to peg it, but that's probably a reasonable estimate. I think it might be a little bit on the lower side of that just by visually kind of looking around. But it's a problem that every county, every community across the country has been facing, because for years and years, cats were sort of mousers outside, and then all of a sudden people started feeding cats outside, and then we got more cats because there's more food, and it sort of becomes a vicious cycle.
Yeah, I guess that brings me to the question, how much did you say it costs to process an individual animal?
About $185.
And of that, how much is the spaying and neutering charge?
The spay and neutering is probably about half, maybe a little bit less than half, maybe between a third and a half, and that would include all of the drugs and the surgeon's time and everything.
I guess my question is that they're already releasing all these cats. Why don't you just go ahead and release them?
Well, and it's definitely one of the issues that needs to be looked at in more depth. When I started in this industry years ago, I was advocate to not ever have any cats, sterilized in return. Thought that was the wrong process. And then after years and years of catching and euthanizing, literally tens of thousands of cats, when I moved to Jacksonville, they said, let's try this program. And I was like, I'm willing to try anything once. I'm skeptical that it will work. But properly assembled, those trap and return programs actually will cut down on the population. In Jacksonville, before I left, we had seen about a 60% drop in cat intake because we were cutting off the new births. And when you trap and remove an animal from an area, but if the food is still there, another animal moves in, another cat has more babies. So it's got to be a very comprehensive program, but it has shown positive in San Diego, in San Jose, Albuquerque, Charleston. We're seeing across the country some of these key programs starting, and I'd like to see us maybe take another look at it. We have a pilot program right now, but I think we can do better than what we're doing right now.
What do you think some of the biggest challenges you're facing right now?
I think partially education, getting people to understand how many animals come through the shelter, what types of animals come through the shelter, getting over some of the stereotypes of, the average Florida brown dog is probably a mix of a bunch of breeds. It's not a pit bull, even though everybody, we have
looks like one.
Yeah, and we have a fair number of pit bulls. I'm not saying we don't, but I think a lot of people are tagging animals that are not pit bulls or a very small percentage pit bull as a pit bull. So we've got to kind of work on, getting people to understand just because it's a big brown or big brown and white dog.
Or the pug nose.
Yeah, it might be a mix of a lab with a Great Dane, with a pit bull, with a whatever. It could have a dozen different, just like our society is.
Like me, huh?
Right, exactly, exactly. Just like our society is sort of a conglomerate, so is our pet society.
What kind of animals do you handle besides cats and dogs, which I assume are the largest percentage?
We've actually narrowed down to strictly cats and dogs.
Oh, okay.
In the past, we used to handle a lot of other animals, but the euthanasia rate of those animals was 95% plus. It's really not what the public shelter is supposed to be dealing with, is primarily cats and dogs. So the Humane Society has kind of taken on the responsibility for those extra animals. Their placement rate is closer to 100% because they have the facilities, and it allows us to become experts at cats and dogs. That's what we need in order to get most of them out alive.
Now, our shelter is not, the county shelter is not a no-kill shelter, right?
No, the county shelter is not a no-kill shelter. Our goal is to reduce euthanasia or the killing of animals in a humane way down to as small a percentage as possible. About a year ago, it was around 45% of the animals that came in the shelter that also left the shelter alive. At the end of the last fiscal year, which ended in September 30th, we had that number up to 70%.
Wow, great.
Last month, we had it up around 85% for dogs and 78% for cats.
Oh, that's
so
great.
Headed in the right
nice
direction.
Move.
Yes.
Obviously, the tools and the programs you're putting in place are having an effect.
Yes, and I think not only the tools and the employees, but the community is really rallied around, and the new volunteers that we have, the new programs, the rescues are taking out hundreds of animals to help us place them, because we're in one fixed location, so we can draw X number of people to that location. But if I've got rescues scattered throughout all of Hillsborough and maybe even some of the surrounding counties, I've now expanded the market of where people can come and get a shelter dog.
Now, when you speak of that, let's go two things. One, Where is your fixed location?
Our fixed location is 440 North Falkenberg, so that is, and I'm not great with directions, but it's just off of Adamo. I believe it's north of Adamo, and it's sort of near the jail, and
Right.
the public works, public utilities is on the other side of
I think
us.
the Board of Elections out that way also.
Board of Elections and the tax collector, all down that same road. So if you can get on Falkenberg in what I like to call Government Row over there, we're right in the middle of it.
Do all those wonderful things, huh?
And you can't miss us now because we've trimmed up the trees a little so you can see us, and we've added some nice bright colors. We don't look like the jail anymore.
Now, you talked about having the rescues. Let's explain that a little bit.
Yeah, one of the issues I think that shelters have, or public shelters have had an issue with in the past, is thinking we're the only ones who can do this. We're the best ones. We can do it ourselves. And when 20,000 animals come in from the community, I don't think it's practical to think that one group can do that. So we have dozens of rescue groups. Some take a couple animals, some take a couple hundred animals over the year. And
Are these specific to breeds? Generally, the rescue
typically,
groups?
typically not. Actually, I'd say probably 80% of ours are take any breed, 20% are breed specific. And both play an important role because the breed specific ones can help handle animals that have little quirks because of their particular breed.
Overbreeding.
Overbreeding, some genetic issues,
Yes.
some behavioral issues. Most of that gets bred out of them when they're mixed with other breeds. It's why I always tell people some of the best animals are actually your mixed breed because they have better health and they actually have better behavior. I own one mixed breed and I own one very temperamental, probably a purebred. Both came from the shelter, but my mixed breed is a lot more mellow than my pure breed.
When you're talking about the animals, you exude that you care about them. And I think that's very important. But you also have I'm going to use the term no-nonsense business. And I think the two have to go together, don't you?
I agree. And I think that, one of the things I try to tell my staff is, good business principles, good customer service are key. I think a lot of people love animals. So instead of the old litmus test being how much you loved animals and then try to teach you the rest, I want to find somebody who fits well in the team, can help market and move these animals through that love animals. And they do go hand in hand, but sometimes I think we allowed the heart to overwhelmingly push aside the other parts. And unfortunately, the reality is some of the world's best animal people don't have the best people skills. So we've got to kind of get that mix of good people skills and good animal skills in the shelter.
Especially if you're having the public come in.
Absolutely, and we've got to reach out to the public in order to get the public to come in and adopt animals. So customer service is at least as important as the animal skills, and I think that's been missed in the past.
Let's talk about volunteers.
Volunteers, we have some of the best volunteers. They do a ton of work for us. We're seeing the program back up and running. We kind of slowed it down for a while because it lacks some structure. So we put together a volunteer manual, some guidelines.
Volunteer coordinator?
Volunteer coordinator and an event coordinator. So we've got both someone to help with the events and with the volunteers. So now we have the ability to really develop that core group, and they are fantastic. They do hundreds and hundreds of hours. I've got some volunteers that have in excess of 500 and 1,000 hours of volunteer on top of their normal work, and that's just amazing.
Now, is the county the one that has the Adopt-a-Pet vehicle that goes out with animals?
We used to. It was called the Mobile Adoption Vehicle, and it died. It was, I think when the county got it, it was used, and this year, every time we took it out, it was costing us $5,000 or $6,000 to repair. So we moved on from that, but we have a replacement vehicle now. Now we have one of these big Freightliner high vans, so we can put about a dozen animals in that. It's all marked so you can tell that it's coming from our shelter, and that allows us to do outreach. So it's about half the size, but it actually can hold twice as many animals because it's designed specifically for that purpose.
Out in Sun City Center, we have what we call Fun Fest. And, it must have been 3 or 4 years ago, they brought out that van with all of the animals, and the people adopted a lot of them, but we were never able to get you to come back, and I suspect it's because the van just wasn't running, but sure like to see you back out there.
Yeah, we would love to. We're getting a lot more invitations. Right now we have the one vehicle. I am trying to kind of work out a way for us to perhaps dual purpose our animal control vehicles, so when they aren't being used to pick up strays, perhaps we can use them to go to additional events, because it is good to do that outreach, and we adopt a lot of animals that way.
Well, there's a lot of loving homes in Sun City Center, believe me.
I imagine it's
a
a
lot
great
of older
place.
people that just love to have an animal, and maybe they aren't able to go to the shelter. So coming out to us in one of those big events where there are anywhere from 6,000 to 8,000 people wandering around, be a good thing for you. So I'll make sure you get a call next time,
Great.
Scott.
The other side of that is County Administrator Mike Merrill had been working with us since I got here, and we are going to begin a pilot program probably in spring, where we're going to try to use some of the vacant county facilities throughout the county and make like little mini pilot adoption places where our rescue partners and us can work maybe to move the animals closer. If we've got a building that's not currently being utilized for some other purpose, why not maybe try having little satellite adoption centers?
What about the health of the animals? What kind of health staff or health programs do you have for the animals that are brought in?
The thing that we're very lucky is we have a state-of-the-art veterinary facility. It just opened probably a month or two after I started, so probably around May or June. It is built to American Animal Hospital Association standards. It is truly state-of-the-art. We have 3 full-time vets and a 3/4 time vet, so we are, I would say there's probably nobody that has the quality of veterinary services in a public shelter in the state of Florida than us. I think we're the best right now.
So if I come in and I get an animal, I can be pretty well assured that it's healthy and has been taken care of?
Yes, we have a fair amount of tools and staff to give the basics. Now, if there might be something that we couldn't see, we still ask that people take them to their vet and get a second opinion, so that if there is something, we can address that. But they're pretty well checked out. They've been given medication for anything that we have found wrong with them. Some of them may need a little bit of extra TLC because they've been either loose or
ignored.
In the shelter, ignored. So, with a little TLC, we can get them to that point, and then the public can add that part.
Is there, I don't know who would do it, whether the vet or yourself or somebody on staff, but are all of the animals screened, and I would hope they are, to see whether or not they can be rehoused, whether they can be sent back out in the community?
Yes, we are screening everything, and I think...
I would think there's some that, you mentioned pit bulls. Well, you can't blame the pit bull because that's the breed, and that's what they were trained to do. But somebody has to sit down and say, this is one that can go out with the kids, this one can't.
Well, and I think that's part of the difference between a more modern facility and an older facility. I think a lot of times in the past, they would brand a breed as being the primary aggressor because they didn't have the time or the skills to do individual assessments. Now we do assessments and we're looking for the bad behaviors. So, the lab with the bad behavior, the pit bull with the bad behavior, they're equally large, they're equally potentially dangerous. So it's finding the right behaviors that make animals adoptable, ones that can easily be modified, and the ones that can't, the ones that pose a danger, regardless of what breed they are, they're not going to leave the shelter. It's not the right thing for public protection.
What about Saturday celebrations? I'd read something about it. Talk to us about that for a minute.
One of the things that we started a few months ago was what we're calling our first Saturday celebration. And that is a special event that starts every first Saturday. It runs from 10 to 3. We try to create sort of a festive atmosphere. We've got rescues there, we've got food trucks, we've got fun things for the family to do. It changes pretty much every month. What we want to do is let people know, you know, the public shelter is not a sad place. It's a fun place, or it can be a fun place, and it is a fun place now. While there are some things that may not be the world's best for every animal, the majority of the animals are treated well, are happy, are not aggressive. It's just a very small percentage that have been mistreated at home and became to a point where they can't be.
I would think it'd be really hard when you have 400 animals to exercise them even.
Well, and it's one of the reasons that we rely so heavily on volunteers, because one of our volunteer programs is actually walking the dogs and taking them out on a daily basis. One of the things we just started is, if you drive by our shelter now, you'll see a really nice new fenced-in enclosure in the front of the property, and that's to allow us to allow what are called play groups. Amy Sadler from New York sort of came up with the program years and years ago, and it allows us to take out 3 or 4 dogs at a time, let them play, get some of their energy out, and put them back in the cages. Now, they need to be screened before they can go out into the play groups, but that way we don't have to have one person walk. Maybe we can have 2 people handle 6 dogs and have a play group, and
just make sure they're not beating on each other.
Right, and that's the key.
Yeah.
But you know, dogs are
less
pack
likely
animals.
to do that too.
Right, and I think what happens is when they have that sociability besides the people sociability, I think it makes them more adaptable because people can see how they get along with other dogs.
Well, Scott Trebatoski, I am so happy that you are handling this and taking care of these animals.
I'm happy to be here. This is a great city.
It's really neat to see somebody with your expertise, background, and education walking in and making what was a bad situation for a while much better. And he can't do it by himself. He needs volunteers. Call the shelter. See what you can do. Take a dog for a walk. Many of us can afford to take a little bit of a walk. I thank you so much for being with us. Scott, thank you. As executive director down there, I know you're going to do a great job. You're unique, you're special, and you're great. Tell yourself so often, because you are, you know. And we'll see you on the next Spotlight on Government. Thank you so much, Scott. And remember, what you do with the animals will come back to you tenfold. Thank you for being with us.